morning, everybody. We're joined here at Western Tractor Medicine Hat to do a video for the Combine Clinic. As you know, because of what's been going on with the coronavirus, we can't have a clinic with everybody around this year. So this is our first attempt to do one online. So hopefully it works out and everybody enjoys it. Just to introduce myself, I'm Robert Reynolds here at the Medicine Hat store. We are going to go through a S780 here today to do some of the service intervals and things to kind of watch and look for as you guys are running them during harvest. We decided to go with the 780 because it has all the features and options on it that we can cover. Some of the older machines don't have it, so it's easier for me to show you and talk about it than just talk about it and not be able to see what I'm talking about. So with saying that, we will start looking at the 780 here and go through some of the service stuff. Start with the feeder house first. That's kind of the main part where everything starts to begin with after the head. Just take off a couple covers here. Set this aside so the cameraman don't trip on it. So you've got an adjustment here for your belt. And if you can come in, Nathan, and do a little pan shot here, I just want to show people on these adjusting brackets, they've put a double notch in it so that you kind of know where to tighten it to, and once it loosens off enough where this play is gone. So you want to tighten it so that the back of this step is right to the back of the washer. Once that belt has stretched a bit and has come back out to the front of this tab, you want to retighten it so it's back to that first step. That is where they have figured out that at that point the belt will probably start to slip. Of course, we all know what happens once it starts to slip. Nothing good comes of that. So that's kind of one thing I wanted to show you. Another one here is the self-adjusting brackets for the feeder house conveyor chain itself. So with these guys here, they are spring loaded, so they do move back and forth as material's coming in and out. So the same thing, they've got the little cutout notches here so that you can kind of know where to gauge. So adjust it so the back of the washer comes to this little insert step. Once it's stretched enough where it comes out to the outside, then you want to retighten them so that it is back to that first little step. And that is the amount of stretch they want to see before things start to go south on you. So you have one on that side, and you also have another one over on this side. It's a little bit easier to get at than that side, but it's still just as important to do. So here is your other adjusting gauge on this side for the feeder house conveyor chain. So it's kind of important to keep those both adjusted properly. If they get too far out of adjustment, what starts to happen inside is your conveyor chain starts to jump up and down a lot, and the problem with that is you will get flexing of the chain as it's being run. Your top sprockets will start to wear prematurely because the chain is not staying tight on those sprockets, so it will come up, slide down, and just that motion will start wearing those sprockets out prematurely. And we all know once you start changing those components, it can start getting fairly expensive. So it's some things people don't really think about when they're harvesting, but it should be something in the back of your head. This guy here is another chain that is neglected because of the cover that I just removed. Nobody thinks about it. So this chain pretty much runs the whole feeder house. When I usually see them come in the shop or go to the field, they usually slapping up to the top here. It's just one of those things that's overlooked. Your two adjustments are here and here. This is the guy you'll slide back and forth to tension it. There is holes on the inside that you may not be able to see here with the camera that you can put a bar in that helps you push that gear forward. So it's easier to help you tighten it up and hold it in position to get that bolt tight. On that chain, a lot of people ask me, what should I be putting on it for lubrication? Do not use oil. Oil is the worst thing you can put on it. It will collect dirt and dust and just act like sandpaper and start wearing it out even worse than if you had nothing on it. John Deere has a chain lube for their chains, which works very, very well. I have went off of the chain lube about 4 or 5 years ago and started using a product that John Deere makes called Super Lube that you use for spraying the axle slides on sprayers. It goes on more of a dry spray, so I find that it doesn't collect the dirt and the dust quite as much. We have had really good success for guys that use it regularly. It does give that chain another year's life if it's used regularly and the chain is maintained proper tension. So proper tension on these chains is you just want to be able to push on it and be able to get a little bit of flex. If you've got to push on it like a He-Man, you've got it too tight. If that thing's flopping all over, you haven't got it tight enough. So that is a fairly important piece to keep in mind. These chains I usually see when they come into the shop are changing them yearly because they've seized up and they have so much play in them that there's no adjustment left. So it is something that's overlooked on a regular basis. So that is part of why I'm bringing it up. You do have 2 grease zerks here on the slip clutch. You only want to give those zerks 1 pump of grease, and I would recommend to do that depending on how much you're using it. If you're taking in big loads and you're using your pickup, you might want to do it every 50 hours. If not, I believe the recommended interval is 400 hours on grease on those. I want to show you something that we do as Western Tractor. On the front of our machines, the late 680s and all of the S780s now have got fore and aft on the feeder house, so they tilt this way. When you're running a flex draper on the front of these machines, there's only so far you want to have this either tipped forward or tipped back. This is a calibratable item, so we have made decals and put decals on here so that you from the operator in the cab can kind of see when you've zeroed it, if these lines line up with the white marks we put on, you know that that's calibrated at a true 0. If you line them up and you're like +4 or -3, you know something has gone wrong here, and when you're setting your head into the ground to start cutting, you're going to be at a different position than what you think you are, and you can start wearing the bottom pan and skids out prematurely because you might think that you're tilted back and it might be tilted all the way back. So it is something that we do as Western Tractor. Put those on so that it gives you a little bit of an idea whether the calibration is still good or whether the calibration has gone bad. Something else that I would like to talk about is your reverser. So when you do change the oil in your reverser, which is a yearly change, it is vented to atmosphere. So the reason that John Deere wants it changed is because it can pull moisture in from the heating up and cooling down at night and sitting over winter. Moisture will get inside that gearbox, and we all know what moisture in oil is like. It's not a good pair. So it's something that needs to be done yearly. When you do change the oil and fill this back up, make sure that the feeder house is all the way to the top, lifted in its highest position that it will go. There is a drain plug directly on the bottom, and then you can refill back through here, or you can remove this nut and fill until the dipstick says you're at the full position. All right, now that we've done the feeder house, let's move around to the left-hand side and go through some stuff. So we have, over the last few years, kind of designed a few little things that we've added to the machine to try to make things a little bit easier for you as a reminder and as just a quick reference to be able to see. We have designed some stickers that we put on the combine that gives you the actual hour for when you should be greasing those zerks. It's not something that you'll probably find other companies do, but at Western Tractor, we figure if we can make things easier for you, things are just easier and better. So the more that you can grease your machine and the quicker it is for you to do, it's less downtime for you. It may not seem like a little thing, but if you got to spend 10 minutes looking at this, trying to figure out what it is, we'll walk up, have a look, boom, grease, and you're on your go. It's the way to go. Keep that combine running. We'll remove a couple here just to show you what we're discussing. So something we started here last year on all our new machines that come in. To get at these final drives and grease them, they are kind of a little bit of a difficult area to get into with the duals. So we have run grease extensions on and put the grease nipples here. So we do have another one on the other side, and I'll show you that once we get to it. But we've also put the sticker there to show you that it is a 50-hour service. Some people figure it's a 400, and I'm not sure where that misconception comes from, but it is a 50-hour service for those final drives. They do a lot of work, they carry a lot of load, so let's try to keep those greased a little bit. Hopefully making it a little bit easier, you guys will be able to grease them a little more often. So we will move a couple shields here and have a few more that kind of stand in behind. So other than one grease zerk up here we're going to go through, most of these are a 400 hour. So it's not something that you'll have to remove these shields constantly to do. But I just want to let you know they're there. A lot of customers do bring their machines in for Performax. So that is something under the Performax that we do grease, because you won't put 400 hours on in a year. So it is something that's done here, if that's a concern. All right. So we also have another grease zerk up in here, which is on your fan drive. Sits right there. That one is also a 400 hour. And Nathan, if you just want to go around to the front here, and we'll show some of these ones that are hidden a little bit. So on your reel pump drive, there's a grease zerk that sits right down in here. That one also is a 400 hour. So like I say, it's not something you're going to have to remove those shields lots for. But it is nice to take those shields off time to time and just see how much debris is built up back in here. There's a lot of areas where it can collect, and we all know what happens with fine dust and heat. So it is something to, you know, every once in a while take your shields off and kind of clean some of that stuff out. We do have another grease zerk back up here, sitting right underneath the drive there for your feed accelerator. That one there is also a 400 hour also. And you have your tensioner sitting right there, which is spring loaded. So that's another guy that kind of gets missed a little bit because the cover is there. It is something that a guy should check. You don't need to remove this shield completely to get at it. You just need to slide it back. But it does have a gauge on it also to show you where to tighten it to and how far it's moved before it needs to be retightened. So again, same thing, back of the washer to the bottom of this first step. Once the back of that washer reaches the end of the gauge, it's time to readjust. The reason that I'm mentioning it is because this is one that does get neglected quite a bit. There is a lot of torque that goes on this belt. This is spring loaded, so it does move up and down constantly while it's running. They have put a wearable bushing in there to take up that wear as it slides up and down. But over the years, it's one that's been neglected and missed so much that what happens, it'll wear that bushing right out, then the rod starts wearing into this. Now you've got this wore out and you've got the rod wore into, so now you got to start replacing whole components. Problem was, back then they didn't have this piece as a removable item. It was all one bracket welded to the machine. So now they've got a little wiser and made that a removable plate, so it can be changed if it does get wore out too bad. Another grease zerk, if you want to come back around, Nathan, that I'd like to show everybody. We put another sticker here too, and on the sticker it does say it's just a yearly. So it is up in behind this pulley here on this drive shaft. And unfortunately, it just seems to be the nature of the beast. When that guy stops, the grease zerk's facing forward. So sometimes you got to get around to the front side to get at it. But it is just a yearly interval, so only give it 1 or 2 pumps. What that's doing is you're putting the grease into the splines, and when you're engaging that and running that shaft, those splines just help it last a little bit longer with a little bit of grease inside of there. Plus, if anything ever does happen and you need to take it apart, being that it's greased, it comes apart a lot easier instead of trying to beat and pull and go like crazy to get the shaft out. So another grease zerk that we've got here, we've put a sticker, is up top. And this guy here, he also is a 400 hour, as it says on the sticker. And where that grease zerk is, it's right behind this sprocket, right here. So that's another one that people kind of miss a little bit, just because it's kind of out of the way. So you also have your chain tensioner up here for your unloading auger. Again, it has the same step gauge on it so that you know where you need to readjust it to once it's stretched to the end of the gauge. There's also a grease zerk that sits right up top there. It does have a white label from Deere. It says it's a 400-hour grease zerk. That there is going to be for your turret, for your unloading auger when you swing it out. We have another, let's close this up here. We have another grease zerk right here. This one is a 400-hour. It's got a Deere sticker on it. And that one is for your discharge beater. It is a little bit hard to get up and behind there to get at it, so they do put a line on there to extend it back so that you can get at it. So we have an air filter on this side for your engine debris management system. So unless you've got a 14 and newer combine, you probably wouldn't have had these on there for the S series, but we've had to, Deere has had to add them because of the whole emissions stuff that we need to have on these machines now. So you have an inner and an outer filter. So this is your outer, and then you have another inner one. We do not recommend blowing these out with air. They are a paper element, so if you hit it with too much air, you will blow a hole through it, and once you put a hole through it, it really doesn't filter too much. So if a guy does need to take these out during harvest and clean them, and you don't have another filter, just take them and bang them on the side of the wheel, knock all the heavy stuff off, and away you go. A good gauge for these is they're nice and blue inside, same as they're on the outside when they're new, but once they get a little bit of material, that blue will go away. Once that bluing on the inside starts to change color, and you will notice it, it's now started to pull dirt through the filter, and you definitely want to get it changed out. Kind of a rule of thumb on the inner to the outer is you can usually do 2 of these changes before a guy needs to change that inner filter. So this one is a little bit more difficult to get at and very unseen. There is another on this drive shaft that you have that basically runs the whole combine once you engage it. Right here where the 2 shafts come together, there is a grease zerk on the back side, right there. And what that grease zerk is doing is it's keeping those splines for those 2 shafts that slide together, keeping them greased. So it's helping that take up that little bit of play that might be in there and keeping things from wearing faster. So that will be the last one sitting up here that's kind of hard to get at. We'll go to the back side here now. Now we'll just flip that door open. So like I said, I did mention that one there, and that one is for your discharge beater. So we have another one that sits up here for your overshot beater. So there's another one here, and then we've also got another one on the other side. We have stickers on the other side so you can see it because it is kind of a harder one to get at. Your tensioner for your discharge beater is right here. Again, we have a step gauge, so you kind of know where, back of the washer to the first step. Once that washer reaches there, you need to retension that up. This is another kind of important one to keep going at. If that belt starts slipping and your discharge beater is not turning the way that it is, it doesn't take very long to plug up your whole back end of your combine. So you definitely want to keep that guy tensioned. And trust me, I have seen it happen more than I'd like to say. So I'll move this cover here. I just want to show you something that isn't there anymore. On some of the older machines, there used to be a grease zerk back here, but there's not anymore. They've done away with it. So on the back side, there used to be a grease zerk here, and that for your chopper. They've done away with them because they found that guys were pumping too much grease into those bearings, and they were causing them to overheat and taking them prematurely. So there is no more grease nibbles back there. They haven't been there for quite some time, so it's not something that you need to worry about anymore. So that filter that I had showed you earlier with the engine debris management, what that was for is it's to keep this area up inside here clean. The reason it needs to be there is when you are doing a burn, whether it's an active, a passive, or a parked regen, that area inside needs to be kept very, very clean. The temperatures that those canisters run are extremely, extremely hot, so they keep that area clean in there so it can't start a fire inside internally. So that's what that engine debris management filter is for. We also have one more grease zerk that sits up top here that is kind of hard to get at, and it isn't the easiest. But where this belt runs up in here, when you rotate this over, and I'll try to rotate it for you to find it, there is a grease zerk that sits right inside the middle of that pulley. I'll try to turn the belt here, rotate it over so you can see it. So there's the grease zerk right there. Can you see that, Nathan? So that is a 400 hour also, but it is there, and you'd be surprised how many people have no clue that it's there. So it is on the sticker, which we did show previously there on the side of the combine. It does show you that it is there in case you forget, or we have this video online and you can go back and look anytime. One other thing I would just like to mention, you've probably seen this over the prior years, us putting white marks. This is something that we do here at Western Tractor. The reason that we mark these is because those rubber inserts that are in there flex back and forth every time that this guy's moving. So it's a way for us to tell whether these rubbers are starting to wear out and getting bad. I wouldn't say everybody's experienced, but a lot of people have, where one of these arms, whether it be the front or the rear, have broke, created some damage inside. So we have started to white paint pen markings on there. If we see those lines rotated and they're not lined up anymore, we can tell right away that something's going wrong with this arm, and we can get it changed out before anything major inside starts to go and fail. And it's also a good indication for you guys too. If you see one of these turned, let us know right away. Because when those arms fail or break, it creates a pretty big expense to repair inside. So I think that's pretty much it for this side of the combine as far as the maintenance side goes. Again, I will just reiterate, I know it's something that, you know, when harvest comes, it's time to go. Get her done, get her going, but please do try to keep your belts and chains adjusted. May not seem like a big thing, but it will save you some money down the road, that's for sure. So there is one other that slipped my mind, which if it slips my mind, it's probably going to slip yours. I am going to show you up top here. On your rotor drive, there are two grease nipple, well, sorry, there's one grease nipple here, and I don't know if we can see, but back over on the opposite side, there's a plug. So there used to be on the older machines two grease nipples on there. They've removed the one and put a plug in there because people were over greasing it. And I'll show you here on the sticker what it is I'm referring to. So on that drive, you've got a 50 hour and you've got a 400 hour. So the 400 hour will have the plug in it. The 50 hour has the grease zerk. The reason they did away with it because people were both greasing those at the same time and they were putting way too much grease inside there. Then when you expanded it, collapsed, it was pushing grease and gaskets and seals and everything out. So there is a 50 hour grease zerk that's there. Just give it 2 or 3 shots. The 400 hour grease, you need to remove the grease nipple, remove the plug, put it in. You want to have your rotor drive so that it is closed up all the way. And when I mean closed up all the way, right now we have it opened up. So this, you can see that you can't see the piston here. So when you have it the other way, you'll see the piston extended. That makes the cavity the smallest inside, and then grease it. If it is just like it is sitting here now and you pump too much grease in there, when those shivs close, that cavity inside becomes smaller. Now it starts pushing that excess grease out. So that is why they make it a 400 hour service, and that is why they have a plug in it instead of a grease zerk. So if you do grease that at 400 hours, if it's something that you do your own maintenance, make sure that you take that grease zerk back out and put it into the 50 hour slot and put the plug back in the 400 hour. And if you're not sure before you do it, maybe just mark it that it's the 50 so you know which one it is. But as I say, that is something that we do when the machine comes in for Performax. We will do the greasing in the service side of it. All right, folks, let's move to the back end here and have a look at some of the Zerks back here. So on the back axle here, Nathan, if you want to come around to this side. So we got a few grease Zerks back here. You've got one on the top, you've got one on the bottom, and then if you can pan inside here, you've got one inside here on the axle itself. So all three of those are a 50-hour grease interval. On your tie rod, on the front side here, on the very, very bottom, Nathan, if you just want to come around to that side, we'll show them that one. Gonna get the cameraman doing some exercise today. So on the bottom, we've got a grease Zerk on the tie rod also. That one is a 400 hour. So that one is more or less a once a year, being that it's a 400 hour. So we'll come around to the other side. We've got the same setup over here, duplication. So again, you've got your two grease nipples, one on the top, one on the bottom, and again, one on the inside. And like I said, those are all a 50-hour grease Zerk. And then you've got one on the tie rod here again, which we just showed you on the other side, which is a 400 hour. So before we continue on down the side of the combine there is something that I'd like to show you inside as far as the elements for the Chaffer. It isn't really a serviceable thing, but I do get quite a few phone calls during harvest as far as I'm having issues getting my sample clean properly. White caps, just straw, half debris coming through. Part of the reason why that is happening after they've spent a fair amount of time trying to get their sample cleaned up, and no matter what they've done, it doesn't seem to make any kind of a difference. I'll show you one of the most common things that I run into, which usually I can talk to a guy over the phone to get it straightened out. So I'll just lift the chopper here and we'll have a look inside. Okay, so inside here, so this last roughly 2 feet is a manual adjust. It isn't something that is adjusted from the cab. Now this is what they call your dual range Chaffer. So from here forward, automatically gets adjusted in the cab via the combine doing it itself or the operator. This last 2 foot section here, it's a manual adjust, and here is where your manual adjust is. Now the reason Deere has put this in here is because they've extended the shoe and made it longer and wider, and they found by doing that, the amount of airflow, they have had to increase the amount of airflow coming through here. So why they've made this back piece here a manual adjust is they've basically made it to choke it off, is what they've done. So that when you've got a large mat material built up all across the four sections, which is what you want, the air is being pushed there to lift the mat up so the grain can fall down. If these are open at the same gap as what you've got there, air will follow the least resistance path. It will work its way all the way back and come out the back. So therefore you're not getting any cleaning ability up front to drop your grain down. So these fins back here manually adjust. They are recommended to be set at 5 mil, which that's where we have them set. An easy way to tell is go in the combine, set your Chaffer to 5 mil, come in here, and you can pretty much eyeball it. Now you can see these aren't quite the same. Those are set at 6 mil, this is set at 5 mil. So you can kind of see the difference between the two. I'm not sure if the video picks that up, but that is why they don't look exactly the same. Now, these are recommended to stay at 5 mil for pretty much all crop types. There are some crops out there that when you get into maybe some grass seed or some mustard that's pretty fine, you might want to close these up a little bit more. If you are having a really hard time getting your sample clean and you've tried everything else first, you might want to come back here and close these right off. But normally what I have seen since they have put these into the field is if you set these at 5 mil and leave them, you should be good for pretty much most of the crops that we do here. So that was just one little thing I wanted to go over because it is something that's kind of missed. And it is something that we do check when it comes in for Performax, and we try to preset them back to 5 mil. Okay, so we'll just work our way around to the other side. So there are a few grease zerks on this side here that are a little bit hidden. And we have done decals up and put them on to try to make things a little bit easier for you. I pre-removed these bolts just so it makes it quicker and easier to remove for the video. Come around there and take that one off. So we'll start with this back one here. So we have put a grease zerk here, and it does say it's a 400-hour service. So that's, and thank goodness that it's not a 50-hour because, you know, you just don't have to do this often. So up there, and I don't know if we can catch it on the camera, but it is up top on the top side of this bearing housing. So that is a 400-hour grease service. Same with the one that's in the front here. Just pan right that way, Nathan. There's another sticker that we have put there to show you that there is a grease zerk up there. And if you just look straight up, you can see that one fairly easy. That again, as it says in the sticker, is a 400-hour service. Which again, as the Performax, when it comes through, we usually do that under the service segment ourselves. So on these machines, you will notice that, or maybe have not noticed, but these are cameras. And the 700 series have cameras on the clean grain and the tailings elevator, so that while you're combining, you can actually physically see live in color what is going through your elevators. It definitely helps you be able to make a better judgment of how you should be setting your combine. But with the 700 series, the way that they are designed, they pretty much, once you have it set and tell it what you want, it will adjust it all on its own, and this is part of what they use to watch what's going on. So the reason I'm bringing it up is you might want to clean these from time to time. Now in the display, it does show you whether they are clean or not. It is smart enough to know that it can tell you when to clean them. So with the back one, because the door is here, you've got to open it and then just slide it down. Once it's slid down, then you can open it up and you can see the front face of the camera. Come in and get a shot there. So if you start to see a lot of debris and stuff build up on the lens here, you just might want to take a cloth, and usually everybody's got a water bottle with them for water. Just wet your cloth, wipe it down and clean that material off. Give her another wipe with a dry cloth and close her back up. We haven't seen many issues with these things getting coated to the point where guys are having problem with them. They do need to get fairly bad, but it is something that, you know, if you keep them clean, it's just easier for you to see in the cab when you're looking at the display also. And with the one up top here, just stand on the nice ladder the deer's provided with you, and it's the same thing. This one just opens up. You don't need to slide it up or slide it down. And same thing, you can just clean the lens off, and then away you go and close it back up. These are very good high definition color cameras. They show up very well. Once a guy starts running these and experiences what they can do, it's kind of an awe feeling of how smart and how well they will start to work. Another adjustment that a guy kind of overlooks because it's up here is this guy way up top. That is for to drive your rethresher. So you've got an adjustment gauge there that shows you, again with the step, where to adjust and when not to. Also, John Deere's put their sticker here. There's a 10-hour grease zerk on the back side, which is the slip clutch on the back side of this guy. So they do want that greased every 10 hours. Give it 1 to 2 pumps, that's more than enough. But we do recommend doing it every 10 hours. Guys that don't, they end up putting a slip clutch on it every year. You have another one that's kind of hidden in here. So this, in behind this cover, which I apologize, I haven't got it unbolted to remove it, is your chain drive for your rethrasher. So the adjustment for this guy is kind of hidden a bit. He's right up inside. You can see the bottom of it. And again, it's got a gauge on it. It's a stepped gauge so that it can show you where your adjustment should start and stop. You also have one up here for your overshot beater. So there's another adjustment gauge that sits right here. It is visible, so but it is another one that needs to be adjusted on a fairly regular basis. That discharge beater or overshot beater does remove a lot of material out that back, so that belt does stretch from time to time. You've got your adjustments on both your clean grain elevator and your tailings elevator. So I would recommend to be checking these probably at least once a week. To adjust these guys properly, you do need to take these two off, remove the cover, and loosen the 4 nuts in behind. If you try to tighten this down without loosening those, you're just going to bend this all up. Same with your clean grain elevator. You just need to loosen these 4 nuts, and then you can adjust up or down as needed. Usually you're going down to make it tighter. And with the chain, you want to set it so that you can grab a hold of the chain and you can just barely, well, not say barely, but you can slide it back and forth and feel a little bit of friction. If you can pull it down and move it and jiggle it around, you've still got it too loose. If you can't move it on the gear, you've got it too tight and it'll cause that chain to stretch quicker. So just tight enough where you can slide it back and forth on the sprocket and feel a little bit of resistance. Okay, we'll remove a couple shields here. Get my handy dandy screwdriver out. Okay, so we do have some more grease nipples here on the back side of this fan drive up top, or the driven drive. So there's a grease circ that's there, and I just want to point out that here is your sticker for this side of the combine, and it does show all the grease points and the hour intervals, and they do give you a little better breakdown here. They're just kind of showing you more of a better picture so that you can see exactly where it is other than just an arrow, and it does show all the individual grease nipples as this broke. They also do give you a nice little design here for where the belt goes on. So what this belt here is for is this guy here. So if this belt ever comes off, you can figure out how to reroute that belt just by looking at the decal here. They also do have one on the back side of the clean grain elevator that shows you how to route the actual belt that runs your clean grain elevator and goes up and runs your gearbox for your bubble auger. So they also have that guy there for you to show. So something new to the this year model, so 2020, some might call them 2019 because that's when they're built, but you also have clean out plates now on this side of the combine, which you had some before, but they were just a little plate up top and they weren't really the easiest to remove and nobody ever used them. But John Deere has now put these flip down doors in here for clean out plates, and once you sit it in the wintertime, if it sits outside, not everybody has a Quonset that they can sit it in, just pop those open and that way water won't sit up into your tank. Just do remember, come harvest, if you have these, to close those up or you will be reseating all along while you go. We do put a sticker or a tag inside on the steering wheel when they come new to remind you that they're there and to close them up before you go harvesting. So for grease zerks on this side, we do have another one here on the fan drive side. This one is sitting right here. And there also is a grease zerk, and you won't be able to see it on the camera here, but it's right on the back side of this slip clutch where these springs are. There's another grease zerk that's there to grease this slip clutch. This is actually a slip clutch that's in here, so you just might want to keep that greased also. And if you do forget for any of these intervals, there is the sticker that's on the combine that shows what the intervals are for all of that stuff. off another shield. So again, to try to make things a little quicker and easier for you, we do put grease zerk stickers on here, and it's a 50 hour that shows you this is the one right here. Now what this is one that Western Tractor has installed to grease your final drive. So you do not got to get down on your hands and knees and try to squeeze up in there to grease it. So there is a grease zerk there for you to make your life a little bit more easy. And Nathan, if you come around over here, pan up there, we've put 2 more grease stickers so that you can see, pointing at the grease zerks, that they are a 400 hour and that they're there. So a little quicker reference for you to see what's going on. We also include a sticker that we put on here showing you what your feed accelerator belt is. There is some confusion in parts, and depending on how the machine was ordered with what package it has, it changes that belt, and there are quite a few different numbers of belts. So that's what this guy here is for, is to tell you what your feed accelerator belt is for. A lot of people in the past seen this sticker and thought that number was for their feed accelerator belt. That is not. That number is for this sticker, that sticker only. So there was a little bit of misconception with that. And you can see, as it has the rabbit and the turtle on there for your slow and your fast. I know in the book, if you look at John Deere's recommendations for small grains, they like to tell you to put it on the fast speed. Well, in our area in this country, when you put it on fast speed, what starts to happen is a guy will start to have a lot of white caps. So I get a phone call saying, yeah, I got white caps, I've made all kinds of settings, I've done whatever I can, I can't seem to get rid of my white caps. And usually when I show up to the combine, this guy here will be on fast speed. So the problem with it on fast speed is that when it hits that beater, you're busting the material up. It's making the heads and whatnot small enough that you don't get the material that you need to get the proper threshing done. So there are very few incidences that I have seen here in southern Alberta where we have had to put that on fast speed. I would say 95 or more % of the time that is on slow. So in saying that, you also want to have your feeder house matched to your feed accelerator. So you want slow and slow. So this is where it gets a little confusing. People start looking at the sticker and they see the big pulley up here, the small pulley there is small, is slow, little pulley, big pulley is fast. Well, that is the difference between drive and driven. So on the feeder house chain, the small sprocket is your slow speed. So that is where you want to have it set, is on the slow speed. And we do set them when they come onto the slow speed. When they come from factory, they are on the high speed. Problem with that is that it also starts breaking material up in your feeder house, and it does create problems with white caps. The other issue that you have there is you're wearing your feeder house floor out even faster. So we recommend, and we set all our machines that come out of here, slow speed on the feeder house and slow speed on the feed accelerator. And that eliminates a lot of our issues that we have with customers fighting to try to get rid of their white caps. The other white cap issue you might have, like I had said previous in the video, was to make sure that that dual range chaffer was set to 5 mil or tighter. Okay, so moving forward from that, we'll go down in here. I just want to show you something that some people don't realize that's here. So this lever right here, what this lever is for is this is for your clean out plates right in front of your shoe augers. So they have made it so that you can open the trap door and just clean material out, push it down, and it will all fall out. So right now, the way that you see it, this is in the closed position. If you move this to this position, now it's open. So all of the grain that comes up through your feeder house goes through the separator right onto your shoe augers. Those shoe augers can just dump all the grain right back out on the ground. So we want to make sure that this is in the closed position. I have seen some customers write C and O so they know closed and open. We always try to make sure when they leave the shop that these are in the closed position, but sometimes guys will clean them out in the fall, put it away, and then forget about it in the spring, and now you are reseeding as you are combining. So it's something to make sure that that is in the closed position. And while we're under here, I'll show you another grease nipple that's a little bit hidden. is on the back of your drive here. So there's another grease nipple right here on the drive for your shoe augers. So back over into this side, we'll talk about a few more adjusting tensioners that are here. So we've got 3 over here. This one here is to adjust this belt for your shoe auger, and it drives also your back shoe, which in turn also drives your elevator, and that pretty much drives most of this side of this combine. So you've got 2 more tensioners up here. You got one here and one here. So those 2 are also a couple that a guy should check on a fairly regular maintenance. I would recommend to be checking these every day. It probably won't happen, but it should be checked every couple of days. I usually go to machines and they are all out of adjustment. Like I say, it may not seem like a big deal till you start getting into a heavy load, or you get into a little bit of a slugging issue. Now that starts to become a fairly major issue for you. One other thing I would like to mention is our plastic separator covers. This is something that is really important to make sure that they are on properly and installed right. This side isn't quite as bad as the other side, but we will walk around to the other side and I will show you why it is very, very important. The way that the covers overlap here versus the way they overlap on the other side. Since they've replaced the front cover as a 1/2, it makes it much better. We don't have the issue. But these back ones here, the way that they fit, material can get underneath here, push them up, lift them, and start blowing them through. On these ones here, they've changed the design where this one overlaps that one, where it used to be the other way around. So they've got these little steel latches on here. It may not look like much, but them are very important to be in there and in place. What happens if they're not, the way that the rotor spins, the design of it spinning, and with the extra air that we are pushing now, because the shoe is bigger, it has a tendency to force the material through these covers, and guess where it goes, folks? Right back up into your engine compartment. Well, nobody likes to hear about a combine and fire, so that is why I'm stressing, because if these covers are not installed right, you have a lot of chaff and fine dust going right up into your engine compartment, and we know what heat and chaff does. Something that seems to be a fairly small thing, but can become a very, very large pain in the neck, especially if we are coming out to take your burnt combine away. So please make sure that these covers on both sides are put back on properly, and make sure these latches are tight. Alright folks, I want to talk to you today about something about a new final drive setup on the S780 combines. They have changed the way that the duals can be taken on and off. On the newer style machines, you'll notice you've got 20 bolts here. Now those bolts are holding both sets of duals together onto the final drive at once. On the older machines, you had the outer dual was bolted to the inner dual, and then the inner dual was bolted to the final drive. So I'm going to show you on an older machine the difference is what it is. If you see 20 bolts, you know you need to look in your manual to see what's going on. Cannot stress that enough. On the older machines, there was only 10 bolts. So they've got that tire is being bolted to a spacer, and that spacer is bolted to the inner dual, which holds the inner dual to the final drive. So it was a 2-step process to remove these duals. They have changed that procedure for flexing, for weight load, all kinds of different reasons, final drive failures, different things like that. They found that that extra flexing with that just creates too much load. It's just a better way of doing it. It's just a different process that we need to learn. So when you're removing these guys, it does show right here on the tire that there is a different procedure to be done. It does kind of show you which ones to remove, and then you can put that stud bolt in to hold the inner dual on. There is a bigger hole there than the rest of the holes, so that guy will fit in there. And I will show you where these bolts are located. So please do not lose these bolts or throw them in the garage or in the shed and forget what they're about, and then 2 years later throw them out because you don't need them. So they are inside here, and I have wrote on the bag, use to remove duals, read manual. I can't stress, read manual first. Don't wing it, as we all like to do. These are the bolts that are in there. So they provide these so that you can take the final outer dual off and still have the inner final drive attached to the final drive. If you pull all these bolts off, both duals will flop out, the combine will hit the ground, and just pray that nobody gets hurt. So as I had showed on this sticker, they are showing that you can take one of these sections off, and then you'll be able to see that one hole is bigger and it actually fits right over top of the head of the bolt, and that will hold that inner dual off. And then you go to the next step, take the next one off, and so on and so forth, as it says in the manual. So I cannot stress enough, when you see 20 bolts on the outside, you need to read the manual to make sure to take it off. If you don't, damage or somebody could get seriously hurt. So just, I want you to be aware of that. Thank you. Okay folks, let's talk about oils and changing intervals on gearboxes and stuff. So I know I had talked about this one before, but it's always, again, nice to have a repetitiveness just so it sticks in your brain. So on your reverser, that is a yearly oil change. So it's a HD 460 fully synthetic oil that is used in that gearbox. When you're changing this guy, it is a yearly interval. So when you do the change, raise your feeder house all the way up to the top as high as it'll go. You have a drain plug on the very bottom of the reverser. This is where your dipstick is, so you can either fill it through there or through this plug that's on the top. Either one works, it's all good. But like I say, that is a yearly interval change. Another one that we've got here that, now John Deere does recommend to change this with all the rest at a 2,000 hour service, which is your primary countershaft gearbox that's up there. We have started in the last probably 4 or 5 years-ish, I guess, we have found and started to recommend to change that in a yearly interval also. It's 80-90 oil that's used in there. There's only about 1 liter and a little bit inside that gearbox. That gearbox there pretty much runs the whole back end of the combine. It does take a lot of load, a lot of torque. It runs extremely hot. So for that liter and a little bit of gear oil that's in there, it's sure doing a lot of lubricating for some serious heat. So we've found that if guys that are changing that in a yearly interval, the same as the reverser, we have seen a lot of maintenance that has dropped. We've seen a lot of downtime from repairs. We've just been seeing the gearboxes last a lot longer by doing that as a yearly change. So it is something that we do recommend to change as a yearly interval on that guy. It is an 80-90 oil that's in there. If you want, you can use the HD 460, the fully synthetic oil in there if you'd like. It's not something that Deere recommends. It is a little bit extra expense because the oil is a little bit more money. So it is up to you. If a guy's doing that as a yearly interval change, I just say use the 80-90 because you're changing it out once a year anyways. So we will go up into the engine compartment here and go further with some other stuff, but I'm going to stop the video here so our cameraman can climb the stairs. Okay folks, we're back up here in the engine compartment now. Cameraman finally made it up. We are going to talk about the rotor driven. So on the back of the rotor is your driven gearbox. So I just want to show you there is a grease nipple up here too. It is a 50-hour grease zerk. So with that, one thing too with this guy back here is that you should at least once every a couple of days, 3 days, run your rotor full open, run your rotor full closed. And the reason that I say do a full speed up and a full slow down is because the grease that you're putting inside this guy here, if it's set, a lot of guys will be between that 8 and a 950 kind of doing combining as far as the rotor speed goes. That grease will get pushed out to the outside and it'll kind of stay there. And then it sits there long enough with the heat, it'll kind of start to get hard and it won't move. Lots of times guys will complain, well, when I go to slow my rotor down, it takes forever to slow down. It's because it's trying to force all that grease back down off the sides, and it does take a long time. So if, you know, once a week you can think about it, run your rotor all the way full speed, all the way slow speed. It just disperses that grease around in there a little bit better, and it just makes the components last a little bit longer. So also too, back in here, this is where your adjusting bolts are to adjust your gap on your rotor belt drive. So you got 4 bolts, 2 here and 2 on the other side. You would loosen those off, and then I'll just move out of the way here so you can see on the other side. So on this side here is a turnbuckle. So you use this turnbuckle here to move the drive whichever way it's got to go to increase that gap. And usually you're pulling the rotor driven gearbox that way to increase that gap. So the gap that's on here is 5/16 or 8 mil is what you want to set. You just use a drill bit, stick in between the gap of the rotor where you can get your drill bit in there, and make sure that that gap is set properly. Usually you guys will notice that the gap isn't right because they can't even reach 1,000 RPM anymore, and that's a good indication that your rotor belt has stretched enough where your gap has dropped. Or another thing guys notice too is that it does take quite a bit of time to slow down. So the grease is an issue, and also with that gap getting too small is another issue because it allows that spring to stretch out and you don't have that tension on there anymore. And the drive is a hydraulic driven, so it's forced open and closed hydraulically, but this guy here is just forced back closed spring tension. So keeping that belt tensioned up is a little bit of a thing that you should keep an eye on. Usually once a year, once every 2 years, the guy's got to change that gap depending on how much he's running it. And while I'm in here, this is also your 2-range gearbox that they talk about in the operator's manual. So your 2-range gearbox, that's this guy right here on the back. So there is oil that's in there. There's a drain tube on the bottom. We've got kind of like a little half pan we've cut out to run out to the side to drain it so it doesn't make a big mess back here. But that is a 2,000-hour interval oil change for the oil in the back of that guy. And that is an 80/90 that they use in there also. And again, that's something that we definitely can do for you in a Performax when it comes into the shop, make your life a little more easy. There also too, and I'll just get the camera guy to look, you'll notice that on the newer machines, for your rotary screen drive on the inside, they've went to a automatic tensioner, just like they did for the fan drive. So there's no more adjustments left there anymore. But on the first model that came out, or no, I think they've been on this 780 ever since they came out. So 680s and anything prior will have a tensioner on that idler pulley, and you do need to climb down in there and check that tensioner every once in a while. But they've put that automatic tensioner on there just to make life a little easier because it never gets done unless it comes into the shop. So moving forward into the grain tank. Nathan, you just might want to be careful there when you're climbing in and out. So you'll see these 3 silver pads down in here. So these are your scales to help weigh your grain. So when you're moving around inside this tank, do not step on these scales. They are a fairly expensive piece. If you step on them or drop something like a hammer or whatever when you're up in here doing things, be very, very careful. Like they say, they are an electrical instrument, so if you drop something on them or step on them, it probably will throw them out and then they'll need to be replaced. They are fairly robust, but they are not designed for someone to be stepping on and off. It's a gradual weight that's meant to be put on. So moving forward, you do have a dipstick to check your gearbox oil here for your bubble auger, as known as the loading auger. So that's something that a guy should also be checking on a fairly regular basis. It's 80/90 oil that's in there. That service interval for that gearbox is 2,000 hours. It is not the nicest to try to change as it doesn't really have a drain plug on. So that might be something that you might allow your friendly John Deere dealer to do for you. And we will climb back out of here because we are now done in the grain tank. All right, so back here, we're just gonna go through and look at where our oil filter and fuel filters are. So down underneath here is where you've got your oil filters and fuel filter. So there's your dipstick for checking your oil. It's 1540, of course, that goes in there. The regular oil change, if you're using non-John Deere oil and non-John Deere filters, it's regularly 250 hours. If you are using the plus 250 1540 from Deere and a John Deere oil filter, the recommended change on that is 400 hours. They used to have it at 500 when it very first came out. I don't know what the reasoning was, but I see in the manuals now here that they've changed it down to 400, which makes a little bit more sense to me because you're changing your engine oil and filter at the same time as you're changing all your other filters at the same time, right? So instead of being an hour, 100 hours out, I don't know if that's the reasoning or not, but it just makes more sense to do it all at the same time. So your fuel filters, you got one here and one here. Those are to be changed at 250 hours. Diesel fuel that we have now here just over the years has got progressively a little bit dirtier than what we had before. So with the higher horsepower these engines run and the higher tolerance on the injectors, you know, you're reaching some pretty high PSI, well above 10,000 PSI on those injectors. So you know, that's something the guy wants to kind of keep up on those filters to not help your injectors and stuff get wore out by particles going through it. So that is what we've got there. So with your oil reservoir here, so your hydraulic oil reservoir, this is something, again, for the oil in there to be changed, 2,000 hours. It's a 2,000 hour service. There is a filter inside of here too that they do recommend to change. You do also, Nathan, this might be a little harder for you to look, you have a filter underneath this steel component. So that housing will screw off, and then you've got a filter inside that. That is your pre-charge filter for your hydrostatic drive, and that is something there that needs to be changed at 400 hours also. A lot of people don't even know it's there, so it doesn't really get changed that often, but that is a 400 hour interval. So on your main engine gear case, you have your dipstick tube right down here for checking your main engine gear case oil. That's something that we recommend doing daily. On the S series machines, doesn't matter whether it's the 600 or the 700 series machines, the way that these gearboxes and whatnot are set up for your transmission is the transmission is fed oil from the main engine gear case up here. There is a scavenging pump that is mounted to the front of your transmission. So when this thing sits overnight, some of the oil will leak drain down from your main engine gear case down into the transmission. So when you fire the combine up in the morning and you engage that separator for the first time, for the first 10 to 20 seconds, 30 seconds, it starts to pump that excess oil that's in the transmission back up here into the main engine gear case. So you wonder, why am I telling you all this? The reason that I'm telling you all this is because if you come up here in the morning after it's sat all night and pull that dipstick out and look at it and it says, oh, it's at add, I better add oil. So you fill it back up to the full mark. Then halfway through the day, you see that, oh, I got oil running down the side of my combine. What's going on? What happens is that it has removed all the excess oil that has drained from down below back up into your main engine gear case. Now it's over full, so it starts to push it out the breather or out through the top of the dipstick tube. So it's something to keep in mind. If you're checking that in the morning when it's cold, if your oil level is between the add and the full, I would leave it, start the machine up, run it for 30-40 seconds with the separator engaged, shut the machine off, let it sit for a minute or two, then come back up here and check the oil level, and you'll probably see that it's right close to the full mark. So it is something that we do get a lot of phone calls about, and we try to explain that it's just been overfilled, and it's usually not something that a customer likes to agree to, because there's got to be something else wrong if there's oil running all over it. But 99% of the time, that's usually what's happening, is it's just got overfilled. It's not something that they put in the operator's manual. It's just something we have learned over the years. So I'm just trying to pass that little tip on to you. So that To change the oil on those is also a 2,000 hour service. There are 2 drain plugs on that main engine gear case. So there's going to be one right underneath the rotor drive on the front that we had showed you, and then there'll be one underneath the main engine gear case itself. And we can go down there and I can show you those when we go back down below. Okay, so they have made some changes on these guys too now. The def pump and everything is up top here now, where it used to be right here, where it used to be down up underneath. So they've moved it up here, make it a little more accessible for us service guys and whatnot. Your def tank and whatnot is here. I won't really go into that a whole lot, but what I will say is please try to use high quality def. I know there's lots of places out there that you can buy def, and I'm not basically saying you need to use John Deere stuff, but do make sure that it is a high quality def, because if you are getting the cheaper stuff and it's a lower quality, it is going to create problems down the road. So yeah, it's definitely something you want to keep using a high quality def. Okay, moving on forward from that. So with your engine air filter, this is something that, just from what I see and how much they plug, it's good to do a yearly change on these guys. I mean, you're buying an expensive piece of equipment like this, and the engines are not cheap. So what is an air filter versus an engine? And I am a firm believer of changing filters. So realistically, at the end of the day, it's your guys' machines and your money, so you make that decision. But you have an inner and an outer, and like I say, we do recommend probably changing this once a year, the outer. The inner one usually stays pretty good. Good indication on these guys too. You know, they're a very nice white paper filter that's in there. You look to the inside, if you see that's starting to turn brown or darkening a little bit, definitely is time to change, because it's starting to pull material through that filter. Again, with these, I don't recommend blowing them out. You know, take them out, bang them out if you have to get all that fine dust and bigger debris that's in there. Bang them out, stick them back in. Try to keep it from getting as much dirt inside as you possibly can. I know it's probably in the field you're going to do it, so it sometimes might be very hard, but you do have that secondary inner filter there if a little bit of stuff does get in there, so you have that backup. But I would recommend changing that outer one once a year. And again, kind of a rule of thumb with these guys here, it just seems to be the way it works out. About 2 of these changes, and then it's time to change that inner one. So you've got your overflow tank here for your coolant. With that guy there, with the interval change on the coolant, 2,000 hours or 6 years, whichever comes first. I know the coolant is something that is kind of neglected and not thought about very often. It is a very important piece of the puzzle here. It does keep your engine running cool. It does help do a lot of things internally in the engine as far as your cylinder walls and stuff go too with your liners. We do test that coolant. There's 3 different tests that we do here. It's not just for freeze point, impurities and whatnot that get inside there. It can start creating havoc on the inside of your liners and start creating damage. So it is something that a guy should remember, that, you know, to change 2,000 hours or 6 years, whichever comes first. And again, that is something we look at when we do our Performaxes and stuff here in the shop. So I'm going to open up the rad here so everybody can have a peek inside. So inside here is where you've got all your rads and your coolers. We do not recommend washing these out. We have had some in the past where they've decided to wash them out, and the problem with washing them is you never get all of that material out, and when it dries it turns hard as mud. So you do want to come in here and blow these out. You probably should be doing this a couple times during harvest. A lot of material does collect in here, and we have some pretty high temperatures that we run during our harvest season, so we do recommend trying to keep these blown out, keeping them clean as possible. If you do start having any codes start popping up inside about high air intake temperature, 99.9% of the time, these coolers inside here, the rads, are starting to get plugged. So come back here and blow them out. So that is kind of all I've really got for the engine compartment. Alright folks, well that was just kind of a short little introduction to the service side of the combine. There is lots of stuff we could talk about, especially being a service technician. It's just I don't want to make these videos so long that you're like, oh my lord, it's time to get on with it. So if you do have any questions, we can discuss that later when we do our Q&A when we do a live session. So if you have any questions at that time, or if there's something maybe I missed or something that you weren't quite clear on, we can discuss that when we do that. But I hope you enjoyed our videos. And just before we go, there's one last thing I would like to talk to you about. The battery disconnect switch. So when you put this away at harvest, end of harvest, just come on back here and give this little switch a flick. And it shuts all the power down to your combine so that you're not pulling anything off your batteries while it sits over harvest. Let those batteries sit there fully charged and they will last a lot longer. All right, this is Robert Reynolds from Western Tractor, working hard for you.